Okay, everybody. So the nice thing about the way I structured what I'm going to share with you here is I planned to have a lot of my time taken from the presentation. And so it's very modular. And this is going to be very free and loose. And I'm going to try to keep you all engaged because I think that that'll keep you awake, right? What I've noticed about our organization and what I love about it is we have just as much to share as members as we have to learn. And I'd love to give anyone in the audience or online that has experiences to share, when I invite you to share them, to do so. Some of you who haven't gotten to know me very well may not know, while I'm the president of this chapter, I am not necessarily a native plant expert. I wouldn't even say I know enough to be dangerous. I don't know enough to be dangerous, right? So we have excellent seasoned experts in this organization that are involved, and I would love to direct you to them if you have specific technical questions, or if we have specific questions or clarifications during this presentation, right? I'm going to keep you honest if you have anything you'd like to share, but I did a great deal of research, and I just wanted to share with you some of the information that I have learned and the things that I've come to appreciate about trees and shrubs, particularly the species that we're going to be offering at this plant sale. Almost everything I talk about today, you can go onto our native plant sale website and you can purchase. And I encourage you to do that and try to think about how you can add more woody growth to your property. I do think it's overlooked sometimes because it's a much more long-term decision, right? But what's that old saying? Wise men plant trees under which they'll never see the shade. It is a huge responsibility that we all have to make sure we're not just establishing our landscapes for ourselves. This is for our future. And nothing accomplishes that better than trees and shrubs, in my opinion. Some of which are going to outlive us by 2 or 3 generations. So let's start out by talking a little bit about what we have unique here in Wisconsin, which is just absolutely fantastic. I didn't know this. It's a beautiful fact. We always talk about our unique ecosystem here, but what's unique about the spread of Wisconsin is throughout the state, we actually live in what's called a tension zone. And the tension zone is where the northern boreal forests, the things that resemble Canada, meet what are called like the oak savannas, the things that resemble more of the kind of Illinois, Iowa, Ohio, that kind of landscape. Where those two regions of ecosystem meet, you can actually see a representation of both types of ecosystems and both types of trees. You're going to see, more northern-oriented trees up there and more things like oaks down south. But in that tension zone, you'll see both living side by side. And you can see a little bit of that overlaps here in Racine and the southern tip of Milwaukee. And also at the lakefront, we have a unique ecosystem too, because it's cooler in the spring, but it's warmer in the fall. And it's also much more humid. So there's a lot of unique ecosystem here to offer. Because of that, throughout Wisconsin, we have 125 native tree species and 250 native shrub species. That's an incredible number. You look at a lot of other states, it's about half of that. Well, depending on where you go. I wanted to talk a little bit about our history. I think whenever we talk, the long game, I think we need to kind of do our land acknowledgments and understand that the trees and the shrubs were being managed long before our society ever arrived here. I think one of the coolest things about the trees and shrubs of this area are how they were managed by the Potawatomi, Ho-Chunk, Menominee. They use trees in a number of different ways, but this is one of the most interesting I found in doing my research. They use trees as signposts. And so when a young oak sapling would be maybe 6 or 8 feet high, they would actually bend the trees in an orientation that would point to something relevant like water or a village is this way. And that's how they would navigate the forests. Now, most of these trees are gone today. We've cut them down or they just, they've reached their useful life. They're not around anymore. There are a handful still out there. And so you see a historical photo on the right. That's from the 1920s. These used to be a common sight in Wisconsin. Um, Obviously, medicine and management. Native Americans were extremely adept at figuring out how to facilitate, different gifts of these trees for things like aspirin. Witch hazel was used as a astringent. Basswood, I think it's the branches or the inner bast, I think, was used to weave ropes, extremely strong ropes. And then I did not know this. One of the reasons why the prairie was managed prior to colonization around here is that Native Americans understood controlled burns. They had a practice of burning prairie using an age-old technique of stones and sticks and things that sparked fire in order to keep the land clear. And so anywhere that you see those wide open prairies with just like a few bur oaks, the only reason we have those in Wisconsin is thanks to Native American tribes that managed that for probably hundreds of thousands of years. Let's also remember that trees and shrubs are not just pretty, they are useful. A single mature oak tree, and we're talking a mature oak tree, can intercept about 4,000 gallons of rainwater per year. That's a single tree. And so in the heavy clay that we have in Kenosha, native trees act like, their roots are like drills. They create channels that allow water to soak deeper in the ground where they would otherwise just run right over the surface. And that obviously comes into play with our agriculture around here too. We have an incredible amount of farmland, as you know, driving down the I and other state roads. And those crops do need to be fertilized, and nothing against the farmers. We need to eat, but at the same time, when we have heavy rainfall, a lot of that fertilizer runs off. And without a heavy forested area, that water is going to go straight into the waterways, right? It's going to cause eutrophication of the lakes and rivers. It's going to cause challenges. Trees help prevent that. Trees are also fantastic natural air conditioning. I found this stat too, which is pretty cool. On the average day in July, in the forested areas of southern, like Racine and Kenosha, a full tree canopy can reduce the temperature about 10 degrees. That's the equivalent of 5 room-sized air conditioners running 20 hours a day. So they have a huge benefit to not just the ecosystem, but our way of life. And I don't need to preach to this crowd, but if you're asked by a friend, well, any tree is better than no tree, right? So, what does it matter whether the tree is native? I think this tree is pretty. I'm a lot less forgiving about non-native shrubs and trees because of the immense opportunity cost of using that land for something not native. A shrub or tree is going to be there for potentially dozens or hundreds of years. And a lot of native, non-native shrubs and trees really are ecologically deficient or devoid of benefit. And so it is a huge opportunity cost. Insects can be picky. Over 90% can only eat the plants or buds that they were adapted. Very few insects are actually generalists. That includes the bees. That includes the butterflies. The Norway maple is a great example. The Norway maple, even though it's called a maple, I had to look this up on 2 different resources. It does not support a single species of caterpillar. They can't eat it. A silver maple, by contrast, can support 200 different caterpillar species. And so if you're trying to attract birds, if you're trying to provide a flourishing ecosystem for years to come, it absolutely matters whether that tree is native. It doesn't just matter if it's green, right? We're not just trying to, provide oxygen to the air. We're trying to provide food for the ecosystem. And this is an interesting topic. This is one of the things I wanted to briefly open the floor about if anyone was interested in sharing their input. There's this philosophy here, especially in Kenosha and Racine, of restore or reimagine the landscape. A lot of us are living on land that never really had trees or shrubs. There are not many. If you live in an oak savanna, you probably had the occasional shrub on your land, but it was mostly prairie. And so west of the eye, almost entirely tall grass prairie out there. Now there are, Maggie mentioned, there are regional ecosystems, but a lot of tall grass prairie. The rest would be oak savanna, these grass prairies with occasional bur oaks poking up or white oaks poking up. And then the lake border is where we saw thick forest historically. And that's just because of the humidity and the unique climate situation. The rivers, the Pike and the Root River, were actually fire breaks historically. So if there was a wildfire in a prairie, the river would stop it because the fire can't pass over the river. And so east of the river, you often found much thicker forests. So depending on where you live, you may not, if you're planting a bunch of trees on your property or a lot of woody growth, you may not actually be restoring it. But the question is, does that matter? Because the land, our goal maybe is not necessarily to make things look the way they did before. They're never going to look the way they did before. The question is, how do we provide the most ecosystem benefit given the resources we have? And so does anyone have any input on that or any experiences with that in regard to how you considered what you want to do with your land? Are you trying to make it look like what it used to before? And philosophically, do you think it's our responsibility to restore the land or simply offer the ecosystem something that's beneficial, whether or not it's the way it looked like before? Something to chew on. I didn't think I'd get any thoughts, but in case I did, I wanted to offer that to the group. I mean, really think about that. It's an interesting. It depends on how far back you go. Yeah.
Brandon, this is Maggie.
Yeah, Maggie.
Yeah, I've got a little input on that. A few
Sure.
years back, and I know I'm not remembering all the details of this, but I was interested in looking at the original survey notes that were done in this area. And I was able to look those up. I can't tell you right now how I accessed them, but they were the handwritten diaries of the surveyors in the area. And
Handwritten diaries. Wow.
the handwritten diaries. And so they were actually laying the range and township lines in this area and noting, I made photo or I printed, I guess, or took pictures of something. I took them offline, what was pertinent for me, but they were pretty interesting. The creek um, is evident. The Indian trails were marked, the trees that were here. So this was there. I am near a creek and a wetland, but where I am right here is actually a little bit more, not quite upland, but it was definitely savanna. They were
Mm-hmm.
particularly marking the oaks and the large trees. And I think the reason for that was because they were interested in timber resources. If people were going to come
Keeping
here
track
to
of time.
live, they needed to have wood that they could, use for housing and for fencing and whatnot. And rocks and things like that were sometimes used as corner marks or trees. It was pretty interesting. It was also very
Oh.
difficult to read the handwriting.
Yeah.
So that would, for me, would be a clue as to what it would take to restore.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Maggie. The last thing I want to mention is I think you can look up your general land office surveys from like the 1830s.
Yes,
Um,
mine
they're,
was 1836, I think.
Yeah, and so they're out there if you're curious. I don't think there's a wrong answer to this. I think it is something to reflect on. Do I want to make this look like it did before, or do I want to um, just provide something that I know is going to have an ecosystem benefit? The birds and bees actually probably don't care, right? I'd love to get to some plants quickly. I want to get us out of here in about 15 minutes, but I thought I'd share some of those, particularly groupings of plants that we have in the plant sale specifically. And I'm going to mostly go by genus. And I have some highlights I want to give. But let me share some genuses that I'm pretty excited about and we have to share with you that have unique ecosystem benefits, and they're also just pretty. I'm going to start out with serviceberries. This is a shrub. They have really stunning spring flowers, I think. These pretty white flowers, but they also have these pretty red berries. And they are, I think, a summer fruiting plant, and the birds love them. So they prefer well-drained, acidic, neutral soil. I'm going to talk a lot about soil because that's really going to be what determines the success of your plants. You need to think a lot about that. On your land, you may have 3 different soil types. So think a lot about, is this a high area that allows water to drain? And then is it clay, is it sand, or is it loamy? Anything that's adapted to being kind of on the forest edge or the understory, it's almost always going to want well-drained soil that's pretty acidic, because in that layer, the soil is mostly made of leaf litter and sticks and everything else that's decomposing. That's going to be more acidic. Things on the prairie, prairies are going to be really well adapted to harsh conditions because the prairie is brutal. And so you'll have what are called clay buster plants that really don't care what soil you put them in. And then there are only a few that love wet roots, and I'll talk about that. Serviceberries, well-draining acidic soil, they can handle partial shade. And so if you have something that gets 4 to 6 hours, they will do okay there. One of the top plants for attracting birds. I'm going to look at Tom once in a while for nods because I know he's a fellow bird guy. But I saw over 40 species will be attracted by serviceberries. Anything with fruiting, you're going to get cedar waxwings, which are beautiful birds, Baltimore orioles, robins, catbirds. They're going to swarm the trees in June, the minute those ripen. It's also a critical early season nectar source. And so if you're trying to support bees, it's one of the earliest, not the earliest, but one of the earliest bloomers. And that's really critical, especially with climate change. I mean, it's like going to be 60, 70 degrees the next few days. I mean, the insects are waking up too early. And so they're going to be, they wake up and they start starving to death because the plants haven't caught up yet. And so the earlier we can provide flowers, the better. It's a relatively fast grower, but you're only going to expect about 1 to 2 feet per year. And as far as size goes, they're pretty big. And so put these things in places where you want something that's 15 feet tall, right? Think long term. They're low maintenance. What else did I want to say about serviceberries? Oh, okay, something really interesting, the name. In early Appalachian and Midwestern history, it was called serviceberry because it bloomed right when the ground thawed enough for circuit riding preachers to resume funeral services for those that passed during the winter. Isn't that interesting? And so they obviously can't hold funerals to bury our loved ones until the ground thaws. And once the ground would thaw, the serviceberries would flower. And so it was a sign it was time. We could hold our processions for our loved ones. Isn't that interesting? The main thing to look out for serviceberries is called a cedar apple rust. You can look that one up. I don't need to get into the details of it because it is a little technical. But you want to be aware of cedar apple rust when you're managing them. Chokeberries, another powerhouse. Unlike the serviceberry, this is why I share this one next, a little bit of a contrast. Aronia species are much tougher. They're increasingly popular in this area because of the kind of the health benefits. Believe that as you may of it. And I mean, you can pretty much stick this thing where other shrubs may fail. It's extremely adaptable. It can handle that heavy wet clay. For my property, this is really important because that's like basically all I have. I live in a subdivision where they just dumped crummy soil on top of mounds and put houses there. So alkaline soils, the chokeberries really don't care. And it can handle full sun to partial shade. I mean, you can really put it anywhere. It does prefer wet soils. It's drought tolerant though. And so you can tell I'm just basically saying, no matter what you have, you can pretty much put this thing there. 10 out of 10 suitability, very cold hardy and salt tolerant too. And the reason that's important is you live in an area where they just salt the roads like crazy. I don't know about you, but my neighbors just love their salt in the winter. We get we get a millimeter of snow and they're just drenching their sidewalk in salt. And so I have to kind of pick salt tolerant things for, if you're familiar with the term hell strip. The hell strip is that plot of land between your sidewalk and the road. It's called a hell strip because it's just hell for plants to try to grow there. Yeah. Waxwings and blue jays love the fruit, of course. Small, they're called sweat bees, like the flowers. Have you ever heard of sweat bees? Especially because, it's a late spring bloomer. It'll bloom a lot later than compared to the serviceberry. Let's see, is there anything else I wanted to share about this? Oh, don't confuse chokeberry with chokecherry. I did that, actually. I wrote some of my notes here, and like half of my notes are about chokecherries. I'm going to talk about chokecherries. This is not it. And then, the red chokeberry is in this group, but it is not native necessarily to southeastern Wisconsin. So if you're interested in the red chokeberry, that's actually more appropriate to the East Coast and the South. I actually don't think we sell that one, so you shouldn't make that mistake because you're only going to buy your plants from us, right?
How tall do they get?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I actually wrote that down. Let's see. 3 to 8 feet. Yeah, so much smaller than, say, the serviceberries.
Both of those species have beautiful fall color too.
Oh yeah, both the species have beautiful fall color. We're talking oranges and yellows. Yeah, beautiful fall colors. Yeah, right. A lot of so there was a comment in the audience that these plants with berries that I just shared, they hang on to the plant through the winter, and so they're an excellent winter source of food for birds. I couldn't do this without mentioning dogwoods. For those of you who are not, native plant people, this may be new to you, but dogwoods are just like a staple around here. I mean, if you're looking for the most southeastern Wisconsin-y shrub, you're looking at a Cornus species. Pagoda dogwoods, boy, I mean, they are just tried and true Wisconsin to me. The one warning for some of these dogwoods is they're effectively trees. Dogwoods can become 30 feet tall sometimes. They lose their shrub status at a certain point. Now, not all dogwood species are like that. My favorite, let's see if I want to share some bullet points. They're actually a very tolerant species, so I think that's really important. You'll see dogwoods in the middle of prairies poking out of the prairie. They're one of those that are pretty tolerant of heavy soils, clay soils, very adaptable. Let's see, they do like heavy watering though. So you want to make sure that, especially in that first couple of years while they're getting established, they're well watered. And then dogwoods also have great berries, high fat content in the berries for critters. Dogwoods are also a host plant for a particular butterfly called the spring azure butterfly. And so you want to think about this too if you're trying to diversify for species-specific insects, which there are a ton of them. A lot of the dogwoods are going to have butterflies or bees that are specific to them. Let's see. Is there anything else? Very fast growth. I mentioned that. Let's see. A theory for the name, because I didn't understand the name dogwood. One theory for the name is that the hardwood of these shrubs were used to make dags, which are skewers for meat. So you can think of like a lot of the dogwoods have this almost like flame pattern to them with their branches, and they would cut the branches off and use them for various purposes, but one of which would be to stick them through meat and burn them over a fire. And since the wood is so hardy, it would survive sitting over a fire, and those were historically called dags. And so that's what they think the name came from. I wanted to share this with you. Anytime dogwoods come up, I need to share my favorite dogwood, which is the red osier. Against a white landscape in the snow, boy, you can't beat that. It is so cool. And I have a border of these in my back property, and everyone in my subdivision that can see it is constantly talking to me about it. I'm like, I'm the hit of the town. There are cultivars though of red osiers, so be careful. So make sure you're getting a native red osier. Natives are going to get much taller. There's it's called like blazing fire or something. It only gets to be like 3 or 4 feet tall. I don't know. If you're going through the trouble of putting one in, you might as well put in a native. It'll affect the blooming schedules and potentially the nutritional profiles too of the fruit. So go native. Viburnums, another big one. Let's call this one the Swiss Army knife of the Wisconsin landscape. Also very versatile. Showy spring flowers. The summer foliage is nice and clean. And they're also one of those that provide pretty dependable fall color too. I think that they look nice in the fall. They're used sometimes for privacy hedges because they're so dense. And so if you're looking to maybe, I have my back window just is aligned perfectly with my neighbor's back window, and it's creepy. And so I have shrubs that I put up there, and one of them is a viburnum in order to block the sight line from my neighbors. They like moist, well-drained, slightly acidic, neutral soils, so you can have forest edge shrub. But they are remarkably tolerant of clay, so you can get away with them. But if you're having troubles with growth and you have heavy clay, you might need to look at moisture profiles. Like I mentioned a minute ago, they're edge plants. So you'll find them on forest edges. So you can kind of picture that light profile of the forest edge. They do prefer kind of that partial shade. Don't let them bake in like 18 hours of sun in July. We can think of them also as like a bird cafeteria because they provide these drupes. You can see on the right there, very high in fat, very high in sugar. And in the late part of the season, birds are looking to fatten themselves up if they're migratory. And so they're going to seek out these high fat, high sugar fruits. And then as far as height, 6 to 12 feet tall is what I found. I'm not an expert on that. Mine in my yard is about 8 feet tall. And they can live a very long time, like over 50, 60 years. Okay, so this is a long-term commitment. One of the natives we have, which I believe we do sell at the plant sale, Viburnum trilobum, is called a high bush cranberry. And the only reason that they called it that is early Wisconsin settlers used the berries off of it for jams and jellies when the bog cranberries weren't available. Either they couldn't grow them, or it just was out of season, or they had crop failures. And so it was considered like a backup cranberry because the profile is really similar. So that was something interesting. A major pest issue is the Viburnum leaf beetle. We have an issue with that all over the place, actually. Some species of Viburnum are resistant to it. I think nannyberries are somewhat resistant to it. And then arrowwoods, which we sell as well. If you're interested in something where you don't want to deal with those pests, arrowwoods and nannyberries are not immune, but more resistant than others. Roses, I don't think I'm going to spend a lot of time on roses, but the one thing I want to mention is some people don't know that there are native roses. The one thing I think that's important to understand about native roses is we also have invasive roses, and they look so similar. And so you can actually buy some of these invasive roses. And so you need to be very careful when you're reading species names if you're looking to put native roses in. Rosa virginiana, blonda, or palustris. Those are native roses. Multiflora is the species to look out for. That is a non-native rose, and that thing can grow like crazy. There are a few others that aren't really sold, but if you ever walk through one of the trails around here and you see roses in the early summer, unfortunately, more likely than not, those are not native roses because some of the invasive roses they have are extremely invasive. But I love these things. Swamp roses are one of my favorites because I put them in ditches. I have low spots in my yard, and I fill those up with roses. It's also along the edge of my yard because you don't want to walk through these things. They do have spikes on them. Sumacs. I think that sumacs need more love, personally. That's why I wanted to include them. You can purchase sumacs from our sale. These are associated with being, I think a lot of people think of these as weeds because they like, they don't like, but they're very tolerant of salty soil. And so you often see them on the ditches, that's on the sides of roads, because they outcompete other plants because they can tolerate that. The thing is they're beautiful and they have a lot of ecosystem benefits. The other thing is the fall colors on sumacs are incredible. They get confused sometimes with poison sumac, and so make sure you understand the differences. You know, take a photo of this if you want or something, but staghorn sumacs, which are a native, are very similar kind of looking to poison sumac. The thing that's most interesting is poison sumac isn't even in the same genus as Rus. And so entirely different genus, similar looking, but sometimes people think that all sumacs are poisonous. They're going to make you itchy. They're not. Only this species. Okay. A few special mentions. I wanted to highlight a few particular species because they are just awesome. Common witch hazel, cool plant, cool smell. It was used as an astringent by Native Americans. Beautiful yellow leaves. Great option for if you have any low kind of ditch areas, because it needs moisture. It's kind of a swampy, boggy shrub. It has seed pods that explode when it dries out, which is really cool. They'll shoot 20 feet away from the plant. And it blooms in like October? Really late. And so just like the early spring bloomers are really important, the late fall bloomers are important because climate change is making our falls last forever too. And so we have, you know, double trouble for our insects. They're starving to death in the spring and then they're starving to death in the fall. And so making sure we give them lots of early spring and late fall flowers and food is important. Elderberries, really, really cool plant. I'm a big fan of elderberries. There are a lot of health benefits to them that people believe in, whether you do or don't. I personally do. I take elderberry syrup once in a while. I like the taste of it. Cedar waxwings and catbirds absolutely love this thing. And we've been making wine and jelly out of elderberries since time memoriam. Also a wet ditch, kind of a marsh edge plant. And so you do need kind of wet conditions for it. Contrast to a lot of the plants you heard, the one on the right there, to elderberry, 9-bark. I wanted to give special mention because that thing can grow anywhere. I think 9-bark is the most hardy shrub you can buy. So if you're looking for something and you have really crummy soil or a bad condition, 9-bark's the way to go. And then lastly, New Jersey tea. New Jersey tea got its name because, as the name suggests, during the Boston Tea Party and they were looking for alternatives to tea, they used this little plant. It does not have caffeine in it. It just kind of tastes like tea when made into a tea. And so you cannot get your caffeine buzz from it, but you can make an herbal tea from its leaves. It's nice and small and compact too, which is really nice if you don't have a lot of space. It has a lot of ecosystem benefits too. The insects love those flowers. And you can actually grow this one in a pot. It has a huge taproot that'll go really deep if you plant it in the ground, but if you put it in a 5-gallon pot, it'll do just fine. Just make sure to water it a lot. Okay, I want to share just a few trees with you, but I'm going to gloss over these because I see we're kind of wrapping up here for the meeting, but that's okay. We sell these at the store as well if you like plants that fruit that you can eat. Some of the shrubs have edible fruit as well. Here are the trees that do. American plums, black cherries, choke cherries. You want to be very attentive to the species that you're purchasing. Some taste better than others. And because these are native cultivars, they have variety from plant to plant. So not every plum or cherry is going to be created equal. You unfortunately might grow one that has slightly bitter fruit. Hey, that's part of the fun, right? Not every fruit that it grows will taste the same either. These are really important for the ecosystem as well. Huge fleshy fruits, right? Some people complain about birds in their trees eating their fruit. I think that's awesome. I'm happy to share, right? My tree is going to provide way more fruit than I'm ever going to eat. You can do things to preserve your fruit if you like. You can put cages over the fruit. I'm not a big fan of dusting them with anything. Stay away from the pesticides if you can. There are lots of ecosystem-friendly ways to protect your fruit, okay? A lot of these are adaptable. They're all in the prunus variety, the cherries and the plums. Most are going to prefer a lot of sun, though. And so if you're looking at a fruit tree like this, they need a lot of sun because it takes a lot of energy to make a fruit, right? because you're doing a lot of photosynthesis to make a lot of sugar. Anything else I want to share? Prunus genus supports 450 species of moths and butterflies throughout their life cycle. 450. The most that I could find. That includes tiger swallowtails and the Cecropia moth birds. And that's just because of the immense high sugar nectar it provides in the fruit. So I'd be remiss to finish this presentation without putting that slide up, right? And so I wanted to make sure I had time for this. I thought long and hard about how to really drive home the impact of oak trees to you all. And I decided just by saying that is how I was going to do it. Plant an oak tree if you have room. Seriously, the more I read about oaks, the more I was blown away about not just how crucial they are for the Wisconsin ecosystem, but how majestic they are. I mean, you cannot exaggerate the impact, the relative impact a single oak tree could have to your ecosystem compared to anything else in the library. In our plant sale, I think we have 5 or 6 different species of oak trees, and you can find one that fits pretty much any soil and light condition. And so oaks are keystone species. If you remove them, our ecosystem here does start to collapse. They support 500 species of moths and butterflies. And not just species, they become so immense, as you can see in my photos here, that they can support tens or even hundreds of thousands of individual organisms on one tree. And the only effort it takes from you is you just put it in the ground. The tree does the rest. I mean, you can't have more of an impact to your ecosystem than spending that 10 minutes putting something in the ground, right? It'll do most of the work for you. That was research by Doug Tallamy, by the way. He quantified as many species of moths and butterflies he could find, more than any other tree genus. And that's not just in Wisconsin, that's anywhere. The oak provides more than any other genus to the ecosystem. Acorns are a high energy superfood for vertebrates too. If you like your squirrels, if you think they're cute, or any other creature that feeds on nuts, acorns they love them. And they are going to support deer, turkeys, ducks, flying squirrels in some parts of the country. And oaks have incredibly deep tap roots that help stabilize the clay soils. And so oaks are huge to maintain land and make sure that the soil doesn't slough off. And I mentioned earlier about flooding and runoff. The Ho-Chunk and Potawatomi had a lot of cultural practices around the oak trees as well, because the fall was the acorn harvest, and they subsisted off those over the winter. They would leach the tannins out and use those. They'd grind the acorns into flour. And then I mentioned the trail marker trees earlier. Those were almost all, not all, but almost all made out of white oak trees because they were so pliable. Before European settlement, southeastern Wisconsin was dominated by oak trees. It was pretty much, we call it oak savanna. It was prairie, tall grasses, and then occasionally you'd see a bur oak pop up or a white oak pop up, and then there were actually oak forests too. 5.5 million acres of Wisconsin were covered in oak trees. Less than 0.01% was the figure I saw. 0.01 remains. 1/10 of 1%. Bur oaks are really cool because they're solitary trees. You can see them far off in the distance. They were often used as meeting points because they were so common, but they were also so easy to distinguish, and they had different shapes. And so you would tell someone, hey, meet by the bur oak that's shaped like this. And so it'd be really cool to see that view back on the landscape as you drive down the freeway or down a state road, right? And so I wanted to share, let's see, a few things about oaks as far as management goes. White oaks grow slowly, but red or swamp oaks can grow 2 feet a year. And so depending on the type, they have different growth rates, 200 to 400 year commitments of an oak tree. And so you really do, you're planting this tree for your great-great-grandchildren or your great-great-grandcats, whatever your orientation is. One important management technique for oaks, never, ever prune them between April and July. This is the window when sap-feeding beetles will be attracted to the sap that gets created from the cuttings and cause oak wilt. That's a death sentence for the tree. And so I think that was the most important thing to know about management of these trees. Personally, I prefer to just leave them alone. But if you need to prune them outside of that window. And then let's see. There's that disease I mentioned called oak wilt. It can kill healthy 100-year-old trees in less than 30 days. And then because we no longer have regular ground fires, we're not seeing oaks germinate anymore. It's a crazy thing, but oaks are very rarely naturally germinating in the wild. Most oaks that you see planted are going to be artificially germinated or grown from cuttings, taking branches and replanting them. And this is a huge crisis because the scale of that was helping oaks maintain themselves is now gone. They require fire. Most species require some type of fire to germinate. They also have a lot of deer pressure because we control coyote and wolf populations. The deer are exploding out of control. They're decimating the acorns, and they also, unfortunately, they chew on bark. They love chewing off. They'll totally girdle an oak tree if they're hungry. And so that's what they're facing. So plant an oak tree. They need help. Once you plant them, they pretty much take care of themselves, keep them safe from deer and rabbits. But once they take off, they take off. A little bit of identification I wanted to share if you're interested. I didn't know this. Red oaks have pointy leaves. White oaks are lobed. That's all I want to say about that. Pretty cool. The last message I want to share, I am about to wrap up here. Think about your goals when you're picking your plants at our native plant sale. These aren't mutually exclusive things, but there are groupings of plants, and you can look all this up. That may be, if you're interested in birds, you can look this up on Google searches and things. The selection that is best for attracting the most birds, or the most colorful birds. Serviceberries, dogwoods, winter berries are great examples. Not the only ones. But those are great examples. Bugs, there are a lot of these options that are specific to certain critters. Oh yeah, and then that one in the middle, the spice bush, has its own caterpillar that looks like a snake, which I think is pretty cool. When you are designing your garden, remember layering with these tall plants. I think a lot of us think, well, I'm going to put a bush there and therefore I put nothing else. You can layer shrubs and trees with other understory plants that prefer that, flowers or grasses that prefer that low light. And so don't think it's an opportunity cost. Nativegardenplanner.com is a great tool to plan your property. It actually shows you the final space at its peak growth of a shrub or a tree that it'll take up. And so write that down if you're interested. This is free, by the way. You don't pay for this. And so it's a great way to plan your property. This is just an example. And then all I wanted to share as a closing thought is no matter what type of shrub or tree you're looking at, there is a plant to be found to fit any place, any space. There's some resources for you. And check out the website. There is a tree, shrub, and vine section if you're interested in anything that you saw today. Well, that's it. Thank you. Yeah, I'm happy to answer questions. I don't think we have someone using the room after us. And so, oh, we do. Okay, so unfortunately, yeah, we can let them know that we're about to clear out. I will hang around, though. And so if you want to chat, if you want to have any questions, you're welcome to. We have a raffle. And so I'm going to do the raffle, and then we're done. We are raffling first the puzzle.
Eggs. We have eggs to raffle.
Oh, boy. Okay.
Nicole. Oh, I didn't know about that.
All right, here's what we're going to do. Thank you all online for being here. We are going to adjourn the meeting. You are welcome to reach out to me if you have any follow-up questions or concerns. Okay. All right.